So we're here today with David Kloiber, who is running for Congress in the 6th District. David, welcome to Moving Kentucky Forward.
Thank you. It's great to be here today.
Well, I'm glad to have you. You are the fourth candidate from this one race that I have interviewed. Whenever there's a primary and I interview one person, I try to interview all of them. So I'm glad we could work it out. I'm fascinated by the fact that in the midst of a crowded field, you decided to add yourself to it. What prompted you to decide that this was a race you wanted to enter?
When we first started this back in June, I think there was only one person in the race when we jumped
Hmm.
in. Obviously, I know all the people who are running. We've talked a lot about it both before and after. We're all very friendly, and we just want to see what's best for the party moving forward. And so I think that each one of us brings something different to the table, and we've got a different path forward on how we think we can win next November. And again, we're going to get our message out there, and hopefully the voters can help us put the strongest candidate forward so we can win this seat.
Cool. Unlike some of the people who are running, you have some experience with electoral politics. Why don't you tell our listeners and viewers what that is?
So I served on the city council in Fayette County. I was elected back in 2020, so I got to serve right through the middle of the pandemic, which was definitely an interesting and trying time to be in local
Yes.
governance. And then I ran for mayor in Fayette County. So again, in the district, Fayette County is about 50% of all the votes. So I
Mhm.
ran a large race then against a very well liked incumbent. But after that, the work kept going. So got back out in the community, kept working, and here we are today.
So, what is your day job? I don't believe that being on city council in Lexington is necessarily a full-time gig. So, what do you do outside of this electoral stuff?
Well, I'm a businessman by trade, but a philanthropist at heart. So I'm an investment manager, and I've built up companies and investments around the country. So essentially, I try and find communities where we can make good paying jobs, where we can make, something that's going to last, whether that's a factory or whether that's an industrial park, whether it's a hotel or a cattle ranch. We just find what's going to work there, and that's where we try to make our money as we build out there. So that's kind of what I do as a day job. But additionally, I started and have been running a nonprofit in Fayette County called the Kloiber Foundation.
Mhm.
We've been working with education and technology, making sure that every school in Fayette County was one-to-one by 2019. So we had a device in every kid's hands. We obviously did not know how meaningful that was going to be just a year removed, but we definitely saw it as a long-term vision, and we're happy that we could complete that with the school system there by 2019.
Wow. That's very interesting because as I look over the four candidates, you're right. Everybody's bringing something different to the table. As far as I can remember, you're the only one with what I would call some significant business experience like that. So that's very interesting. And I would love to pursue the foundation discussion some more because that sounds very cool. But I want to get into a couple of other things. So, okay, so you're a Democrat. Obviously, all the other people running for the Democratic nomination are Democrats. How would you differentiate yourself from, say, Sherlyn Stevenson or Zach Dembo or Aaron Petrie? What makes you different from them to speak of?
Well, as you said, we all have a different bio coming into the race, right? And that gives everybody a different view. But when it comes to the actual race itself, I like to define myself with just a few very simple statements that carry through into everything I do. The slogan for my race is common sense for the Commonwealth. And it's essentially just we need to take those common sense solutions and enact them. And in doing so, we need to make sure that we're forward facing, not finger pointing. That means we're not going to be talking bad about people that are our neighbors or who they voted for or who's the administration now. We know there's problems. That's why we're here. That can't be the focus of this because we need to give the people something to vote for instead of just something to vote against.
Hmm.
So that's the core message that I come with. It's that we're going to be forward facing. As Andy Bashir says, it's not left not right, but forward. We need to focus on that message. We need to focus on bringing people together and on actually winning this seat, especially since we are now the minority in the voting bloc here in the 6th district at only 43%. So we definitely have to find a way to flip this seat, and it's going to take us going down that path that says we've got policies, not platitudes. We're forward facing, not finger pointing, and we're trying to bring a little common sense so people can vote for us instead of against us.
Interesting. So I could chase all three of those for a while, but let's talk about the common sense solutions. What if I was to ask you, okay, name two common sense solutions that you want to bring to Congress or to the state, either one, what would they be?
So this is actually something I really love to talk about because when you start talking about policy, you really talk about the nuts and bolts of what you're offering as a candidate.
Hmm.
So I would say first and foremost, top of mind, healthcare, right? We have to find a way to reduce those healthcare costs. And my policy and plan that I'm rolling out here is about getting us the healthcare we've already paid for. Now, the way that looks is as follows. The federal government has spent over $200 billion over the last 10 years on subsidies through NIH grants. Those are grants for research. These are subsidies to healthcare companies. And the American public has not received a specific tangible benefit from those dollars. Obviously, the research is great. We need to continue to fund this research to make sure we have new innovations for cancer, or we have new drugs like Ozempic that have gotten out there into the public. But what we also need to do is get a benefit directly to the people who are footing the bill. So, the bill I want to propose that gets us what we already paid for is to attach a rider to those grants. A rider that says what you're paying needs to be the same or lower than what they're paying in Canada or what they're paying in England or any of these other countries that are getting these pharmaceuticals from these companies. It's simple. It doesn't affect the company's bottom line. It lets us cut through all the bureaucratic red tape. And it happens at a point when we're handing them the dollars so it can be a feasible solution. So back of the napkin math, we could save people about $1,000 or more off their premiums just by reducing those costs, the same that we have overseas. And it's real simple since we're the ones paying for that research. So that's a real direct policy on healthcare that I think is going to affect a lot of people. And it gets back to that whole theme of affordability that, all of us are really, really pushing hard as Democrats because we know life's getting harder and harder to make ends meet. Another policy that I like to put forward is about affordable housing. So we all know, specifically here in Central Kentucky, costs of rents are going way up. I know in Fayette County, some of those numbers, we've been on par with some of the biggest metropolises in the country for our month-over-month increases on rental costs.
Right.
Well, how do you put forward a policy that's going to affect what happens locally? We all know that a lot of the local development happens at your local government. I know that very well. I sat in many of those meetings on council. But what we can do at the federal government is we can pull some of these levers and incentivize the kind of development that's going to be best for your community. Essentially, make the market work for us. We all know developers are going to chase profits. You can't fight that. Sun's going to come up in the morning, go down in the evening. Developers are going to chase profits. But what we can do is say, we're going to give you a benefit. We're going to forego these capital gains taxes if you come in and build the affordable housing this community needs. We're going to tie that direct benefit to the actual production we desire in our community. This way, we still let the communities decide what it is they need, because every community is different, but we tie that carrot exactly where the developers need it so that they're going to go there and do it. If we want less student housing and more affordable housing, all you got to do is make the numbers work out, and that's what you're going to get.
Interesting. Those are both well thought out and practical solutions.
It
Excuse
goes
me
back
just
to
a minute.
that common sense for the Commonwealth, right? It
Yeah,
takes a long time. When I started this race, I went out and talked to a lot of people. Don't think these solutions are things I came up with on my own, just sitting in my room. These are solutions that were worked over with a lot of people in the community, with a lot of experts to try and figure out what is a new way forward that's going to move us from where we are to where we need to be. And it's just, can we take this approach of, at the end of the day, it's got to be something that moves the needle for people in their homes. That's what's common sense. And that's what drives each of the policies that I'm putting out on my campaign.
Well, so you talked about talking with people. One of the things that when I ran for office was told to me is you should have a kitchen cabinet. You should have a board of advisors or people whose opinions you trust, not necessarily staff, but people who are on the ground like you are. So do you have some of those people in this district?
So I call them my VPs of common sense. So
Okay.
these are people that I trust. I bounce every idea off of them. First, it starts with my wife, right? She gets to sit right there. She's definitely the strongest voice at my table. Um, but from there, I've got not just community members from groups I've worked with over the years, but I've got a collection of trusted professionals, people that are my close friends that I bring over to play D&D with on a regular basis.
All
So
right.
I'm a forever DM. I've done this for about 13 years now, and the people that I trust and respect who are professionals in the community, grew up here their whole lives. They're also my closest friends. I bring them over. We hang out. We do the storytelling, and we also just break down what we think we'd like to see in the community. So yes, my VPs of common sense are very prominent in my life, and I try to make sure I'm not doing anything in a vacuum.
So when you were on the council, were you able to do some common sense things there? Name one thing on the council that you're particularly proud of that you consider a real common sense solution.
So a lot of the work we did was around ARPA funding. This was the funding that came in during
Right.
COVID in order to try and revitalize our community. Um, One project we did was directly related to revitalizing some businesses and getting them these small business loans that did not have, interest repayment and no repayment penalties on them. This was just it was a simple and consistent way for us to get the people directly affected, not in the health aspect, but in that economic engine back up and running. So I was really proud of the work we did on that. And with everything we did, getting those funds back out into the community. Um, there were several common sense solutions that I tried to push forward. One of them, we were getting a lot of complaints about shopping carts in the district. Just you'll see abandoned shopping carts. And I found in talking about it, we had no department or division that was focused on this. So I put together an ordinance to say, look, let's work with these companies to try and get them back their shopping carts because it costs us money to both collect them and to go take them to the dump. And wouldn't it be nicer if they just went back to the companies that already owned them?
Hmm.
So worked on that process for a while. We were not able to get it passed while I was on council. I believe there's still people talking about those issues. But the point is, if you see a problem, there's usually a way to bring the community together in order to solve it, right? There's solutions that exist. A lot of people have done these things in the past. I'm proud of each of the votes we took. When I was on council, we shut down no knock warrants in the city, right? That was a big vote that I was proud to be a part of. But at the end of the day, the state turned around and kind of overruled us,
Hmm.
right? And that's kind of the hierarchy of things, is you don't always get those common sense solutions to be the same for all time. You have to keep fighting for them. You got to keep having representation who's going to go to bat to make sure that we're doing these things that seem really simple. They seem like stuff we should already be doing. But again, you got to be vigilant in order to make sure that happens.
Sure. So I want to ask a little bit about money. Um, as we all know, you have to have money to run. And I think I remember looking at your FEC report and I saw that you had loaned your campaign some money. Is that correct?
Yeah, to start the campaign, I was really focused on making sure we had community input. Like I said, the policies that we've come out with, they didn't come out of nowhere,
Hmm.
right? And so I wanted to focus really strongly early on being able to get out there the right way, talk to people without having to worry about just spending every day fundraising on the phone.
Hmm.
Now that's a reality, and that's something we're all doing as we go forward. But those relationships, those solutions, that was important because before you can ask a person for a dollar to support you, I think they need to know what they're buying. That means they need to know what you stand for, what you're going to do for them. That's one of those questions we used to ask politicians a lot is, what are you going to do for us? A chicken in every pot, right? We'd hear those kind of responses. Well, we've kind of gotten away from that. We talk more about our values now. And I know from knowing all the members in this Democratic primary, we all share the same values.
Hmm.
And I think what's really fair is that we need to go out and tell the public what we're going to do for them. So when it comes to fundraising, we all got our noses to the grindstone there. We're all going to get through here. I'm hopeful that we can keep our costs low in this primary because we need to save as much as we can to get through the general. In a seat that has been Republican for more than a decade, we need to make sure we have as much of our community resources to pool behind one candidate. So I'm hopeful that we can keep these costs low in the primary while still getting a message out about what we're going to do for our constituents.
So I'm interested in two things actually about that. One is what are you hearing? What sort of feedback are you getting about yourself? Are people telling you, "I'm glad you got in this," or are they saying, "Why would you want to bother yourself with this?"
Well, everyone has that question, right? Why would you want to be involved in the politics when you could
Oh
just,
yeah.
go off and do anything else, spend more time with your family? And I think really that comes down to it being a calling for people who are just trying to do that service to their community. I'm
Hmm.
trying to make the community better for my kids than it was for me, every day a little better. Um, but I completely lost the thread of the conversation in saying that. What was the question again? I apologize.
I was wondering what people are saying to you.
Oh,
Are they glad you're getting in the race or not?
that's a weird one to stumble over, but I'll get back to it. Generally, they're very, very glad to hear someone who's actually talking about policy.
Mm,
I mean, the reactions I've gotten going out into the counties, talking in the rural districts, talking even in people's homes, is they're just excited to have a candidate that's going to talk about the policy, that's going
mm,
to kind of step away from, the rhetoric we hear in DC and then just focus on what it is that we can do. Because when you feel hopeless, it's great to have somebody saying, I stand for the same principles as you. It's even better for someone to say, well, here's the plan on how we get from here to there, and here's
mm.
what you can do to help out. And that's the kind of hope that I've been given to people, and that's the kind of reaction that I've gotten. It's just obviously we need something, right? The Democratic Party as a whole needs a new direction, and I believe that the correct direction is the same one we saw laid out by Andy Bashir when he won this district by 20 points, and that's continuing to give people a direction and talking to the things that matter to them at home, and that's what I plan to do.
So the second part of that question that I wanted to get to was you're hearing about people telling you that, okay, they're glad you're running. But what are you hearing about their feelings about Trump or Andy Barr, or is there any movement there, do you think, away from supporting a Republican candidate?
Well, again, when we're out here talking in a Democratic primary, a lot of people are seeing the same things and have a lot of complaints about what's happening, right? If everything was going well, I wouldn't be running for Congress right now. If I was
Mm,
happy with our representation, I don't think any of us would be out here foregoing time with our families in order to do this. But there's real problems, and you're hearing that in people's everyday life about this idea of switching between one or the other. As I've kind of thrown out there, Trump won this district by 12 points, and Andy Bashir won this district by 20. And that's a big spread of people who voted for both of those candidates.
hmm.
And so we know here in Central Kentucky, people are going to vote for a candidate over a party as long as you give them something to vote for. And so that's really what I'm hearing when I talk to people is that, you know, I like what you're saying. I like the policies you're putting out there. You're giving me something I can actually hang my hat on, and I like that as a candidate. As long as we keep going down that path, I think we're going to win this thing.
Do you know Rachel Bidikofer? Have you ever heard of her?
I'm not familiar.
Okay, well, she's a political scientist. She was a professor. She's now does consulting for campaigns. And one of the things that she talks about is that the average voter really doesn't know very much. You ask them about, sometimes they don't even know who their governor is, but a lot of them don't know who their representative is. And so they go into the voting booth, and if they have nothing else to go on, they vote for the letter after the name. If that's all they know, then they vote for the letter. But if they know something else, they'll go past that and vote for person they know, person they've talked with, person that they've heard from, person that they have something that they want to see. And I think that's interesting because that's what you're saying is that, okay, you voted for Trump for, a lot, but I'm giving you something different. I'm giving you something to listen to, something to hang your hat on. Remember that when you go into the polling booth. Uh, that's a really good thing. They're going to vote for the idea if they know about the idea. So let me ask you this then. You mentioned that you gave the loan to your campaign so that you could focus the beginning of it on getting out and talking to people and not having to do dialing for dollars every day. Um, so you've gotten out and you've talked to people. How are you getting your message out? We talked the last time I interviewed somebody, I asked them about door knocking, and they said, well, this is too big a district to do much door knocking. We've got to get our word out some other ways. So, how are you getting your common sense solutions in front of the voters?
Well, I disagree about the door knocking. I'm going to be doing a lot of it. When I ran for mayor, we knocked on 60,000 doors in Fayette County alone.
Mm,
And it was a huge portion of the campaign was to get out and talk to people. And even though we did not overcome that incumbent, it was a lot of great conversations and a lot of people learned who I was and what I was trying to do because of that. Um, However, I will say it's never too early to start. We've been talking to some people on the doors, but mostly we've been focused on relational organizing through parties and friends. It's been a situation where not just fundraising parties. This is just we call them, relational meetings. We get together, we ask people, "Hey, can you get 10 of your friends together in a room?" I said I'll show up for if you got three people, I'll show up and talk. We'll have a conversation. We'll talk about these things that matter. And the big ask is, will you go find 10 more friends for us to talk to? So
mm,
in the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, we had 8 house parties in just the 2 weeks leading up to Thanksgiving.
wow.
And from those, we expect to get another 8 to 10 meetings from just people we've been talking to.
Okay.
We've got 6 months before we get to the primary. During that time, I expect to be in a lot of people's homes, talking to a lot of people's friends. We're going to be doing a thing I love to call Donuts with Dave, where we're just going to be posting up at different coffee shops throughout the district. We're going to have
Mm,
donuts and conversations. They're going to be at different places where people frequent. Just because if you meet someone and they talk to you like a real person and they give you these kind of common sense ideas on where they're going, again, when you go into that polling booth, that's something you can really remember. And so I believe that this race, obviously there's fundraising involved and we've all got to get our message out through the standard avenues. But what's more important than that is this relational aspect of it, is that people can feel connected to an idea if their friend has talked to someone who knows about it, or if they've heard it through a friend, or if they've actually sat down and talked to you for a minute. And that's the goal. We got plenty of time. If we're spending all our days out there talking to people, we got plenty of time between now and November to get a lot of connections with people because it grows. We're all 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon. How many degrees are we in the sixth district?
so, okay, I like that. The house party idea was one that I used some when I ran, and looking back on my race for Metro Council, I wish I had used it more. I think it's very effective. So let's talk about some of the nuts and bolts. Have you done any mailers yet, or are you planning to do any?
So we have walk cards because one of the things we're trying to do is have a touch with people before we give them information.
Hmm.
So again, we have not started on any kind of mailers, but we've been developing a prospectus. We've got that. We've sent it through email when we're talking to people. We've got our walk cards. We get out there. But again, it's mostly just a situation where once you have a touch with somebody, it opens the doors to a lot more people.
Yeah.
And we're going to build this whole race, really in a grassroots kind of way. It's not going to be let's be distant with just our policies. Let's put the policy in people's hands. Let's talk to them about it, see what their thoughts are, because things can always get better. And that's involving more people in the conversation never hurts.
Okay, so let's ask another. Let me ask another nuts and bolts question. Do you have a staff? Do you have a campaign manager yet?
I do. I do have a campaign manager. We've got our print team together. We've got our polling guys and our media consultants. We got everybody, ready to go. But the goal is not to spend money today. It's to spend our money when people are paying attention.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's just a nuts and bolts answer. You can run a campaign a lot of different ways, but I believe that when people are paying attention is when you need to be spending your money. And so right now we're building things up. We've kept things really lean. You'll see by my end of the year reporting that we haven't spent very much money at all this year. It's just been a lot about talking to people, making those conversations happen, and preparing ourselves for what we expect to be, a good media moment those, 7 to 9 weeks before the election.
Right. Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. I mean, bluntly, nobody wants to hear about politics much anyway, and they certainly don't want to hear about it now. So I think that's probably a wise thing to do. So I've got two final questions. These are the questions I always ask when I interview candidates. The first one is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I haven't asked you about?
Well, I mean, we could talk more about policies specifically, but that's a longer conversation. I'm happy to come back and talk to you more as the campaign goes on about how we can address things like wage stagnation and,
Hmm.
getting people living wages and how all these things dovetail to create a stronger community. But um, I'll just I would just like to say, very clearly that communications like this is a touch, but I'd love to hear more from your viewers or anyone about what their thoughts are on some of these things. So I'd want to ask people to reach out. My website is davidkloiber.com. If you can spell my name, you can find me. Um, David at davidkloiber.com is my email. Again, I respond personally to everyone who reaches out. It may take me a minute, depending on how many we get in a day, but I definitely respond to people here as best as we can. Just join the conversation because nothing's set in stone except for this concept that we need to be forward facing and not finger pointing, and that we got to have policies and not platitudes. So if you think you can contribute to this common sense approach or there's an issue that's near and dear to your heart, I want to hear about it. So that would be the big thing I'd want to ask your viewers.
Excellent. And I will include that link in the show notes or on the screen. My last question is this. We talked earlier about door knocking, and you indicated that you disagreed with the person who told me they didn't think it was as important, and you thought that it was pretty important. So let's pretend that you are door knocking in my neighborhood. Let's pretend I live in Lexington. And you are on my porch, you've knocked on my door, and I have opened my door, which is unusual. And I ask you, all right, Mr. Kloiber, why should I vote for you? What's your answer?
Because I'm going to get real world results for you by following a common sense approach. I'm going to make sure that everything I do in Washington passes that test, that you're going to understand what I'm doing, it's going to make sense, and it's going to affect and help you in your everyday life.
Excellent. That's nice and short and direct, and that's what I like. All right. I really appreciate you taking your time, David. Thank you for being with us. We will no doubt have you on again as we get closer to the primary vote in May. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you so much. It's great. These kind of forums and are necessary and wonderful. I'm glad that you have been doing this, and I'm happy to be here.